a while back I put out a video on my website that detailed all of the settings that I use for Betaflight. Some of those made more sense to others, some didn't, and all of it was in pursuit of finding a certain kind of stick feel. The reason that I was going in search of this certain stick feeling was because I got a chance to fly Gabby Chavez, or Cannonball, his Flight 1 quad, and between some faster lap times that I set as a result of flying that quad and the way that that quad felt in the air, I wanted to play around with Betaflight to see if I could get it to fly the way that I wanted it to. I've got to be a little bit careful here because I know that there's a huge difference between Flight 1's sim mode and what Betaflight has been introducing lately, which is called feed forward. Now, I don't know if they're the same. I don't know anything about the comparison between the two, and I'm not attempting to make that comparison. But what's very important is that regardless of which platform you're using, I want to recreate that similar feeling in the air. And so that's the goal of this. It's not to compare Flight 1 and Betaflight or anything. It's about achieving a certain way to make the quad feel and fly. So let's dive into how I got my quad to fly better than it ever has. And it's all thanks to me experimenting with Flight 1. So jumping into Betaflight here, I'm going to skip over setup and ports, and I'll show you really quickly my configuration page. I run my motor directions reversed, so you can see that's normal. And I've never really played around with my system configuration here. I don't sample 32 kilohertz. I leave it at 8K 2K, which is the default, and I just turn off all of the things, including the accelerometer. I find that switching this switch is easier than going in and setting like the minimum angle to -1 or 180 or whatever. Just turn off the accelerometer. We don't use it anyway, for the most part. Set your craft name, and then I'm currently using CRSF. This is technically more of a freestyle quad than a racing quad, but the settings will be used for each, so like it'll be the same on each. Skip all the way down. Air mode's on, OSD is on, anti-gravity is on, and dynamic filtering. Dynamic filtering's awesome. I love having the D-Shot beacon configuration, so when your quad loses connection to your radio or your radio turns off, it will start beeping and warn you where it is through the motors. Great little feature. I use the Hobbywing G2 stack, which supports D-Shot 1200, so I run D-Shot 1200. Typically, I lower my motor idle. I think default is 4.5%. I like to have the quad drop a little faster, both for freestyle and for racing. I like to have a little bit lower idle value. I know some people will go way lower than that. I kind of start to get nervous about motors having to stop and start, which could cause weird flight characteristics. So this is the happy medium that I found for myself. So the rest is the same on the configuration tab. Bumping down to the PID tuning, that's where things get interesting. I typically run two rate profiles, one for racing, one for freestyle. So rate profile 1 here, you can see my settings are 1.03.66, which comes out to a maximum degrees per second of 606, and it's relatively linear. It's pretty straightforward until you get to about, I don't know, quarters, or until you get to like 75% stick, and then it starts to speed up a little bit, which is really only if you ever need like, oh crap, degrees per second. Like if you're flipping out or something like that, you need a little bit extra speed. But for the most part, I stick in the like 400 degrees per second zone, and then add to the extras, in a really aggressive split S or something like that. This, for those that are interested, is actually the same rates that I use on DRL, and in DRL, for example, we can only have certain rate profiles available to us, so this is what's called Rate Bank 2 on the show. Just a fun fact. I know a good number of people on the show fly it. Now, for my PIDs, typically with my builds, since they tend to be a little bit heavier, I have to tune the quad up. So default being on PID for example, the roll, I believe is like 45, 30. No, that can't be right. It's gotta be like 45, 27 or 26, something like that. So I always bump it up a little bit. So I start with the P, I increase the P, and then I bring the D value up a proportional amount to that. So like if I bring the P up by 10, typically I'll bring the D up by 2 or 3. And then pitch, roughly the same thing. Bring it up a little bit, bring up the D a little bit. And yaw is a little bit different. So I was watching, I think I was watching a Bardwell video at one point, and he basically said that we used to increase the yaw P a really like a big amount because the yaw value, basically you would want to tighten that up, and it would never get to the point where you would start getting yaw oscillations because of the P value. So you might as well tighten it up from default. The reason for that was because the yaw value, because it doesn't have as much grip on the air because of the way that yaw works, where it spins up 2 and spins down 2, it doesn't have the same kind of bite that roll or pitch do. And so in order to counteract any negative issues from the yaw value, you would increase the P by a bunch, and it would more proactively fight against that. With the introduction of feed forward, Bardwell and many others started arguing that instead of increasing the P to get a different stick feel out of the yaw value, you should increase the I so that it is fighting more against error, and increase the feed forward setting so that there was, when you give it that sharp stick input, the I isn't going to fight you anymore. The feed forward is going to let you just pass that value through to the yaw input, and it will still have the same like stick feeling as P, but not at the negative consequence of running your P so high that you might get into this like weird situation where it's more aggressive than you need it to be. I know that's probably a lot more than you ever wanted to know about the way people think about yaw, but that's kind of the theory, I think, and so that's what I do. Now, for roll and pitch, I run a feed forward value of 200. Default is like 60 or something like that. And when I started playing with this and trying to find that stick feeling that I was looking for, I found that I talked to a bunch of people and kind of said like, hey, am I crazy for going this high? And I've had reports of people going upwards of 350, 400 feed forward. So I feel like I'm pretty safe with 200. I've gone as high as 350, but when I got up to that point, the quad would like start to bounce back a little bit. It was almost as if you had too high of a P value. So the 200 seemed to be the happy medium for my weight of quad. For something that's a little bit heavier or lighter, maybe there's some different values, but just typically for my setups, about 200 is good. I like that feed forward both on freestyle and racing. On racing, essentially what feed forward does is when you move the stick fast, it pushes the quad to get to the degrees per second that it's supposed to faster. Okay, so basically at full stick, it's still going to be 600 degrees per second. At half stick, it's still going to be the same. And if you go slowly to 600 degrees per second, the quad is not going to be as aggressive at getting to your desired velocity as fast. But if you really whip the stick, the whole thing just it pushes the quad, it fights the I value a little bit and says, okay, get here faster. Like they really, the pilot really wants you to get this done, get it done now. And what that does is it makes the quad just feels more like it's on a wire. It feels like it's really locked in on what you're telling it to do, and it almost feels like it's responding faster. Now, I don't know if that's true for everyone. I did some experimentation where I made J-Rod fly some blind test studies, and he didn't really notice a difference and didn't care. So maybe it's just me, maybe it's Maybelline, I don't know. But in my experience, it really helped me fly faster. I actually found that I was getting upwards of 2 seconds per 25-second lap faster, which is a big deal. Now, for feed-forward transition, I leave it at 0. The feed-forward transition, basically, as you decrease it, let's take it back. As you increase it, so if you get it to 50%, what happens is that the feed-forward value is not going to matter for mid-stick, and it will only start working at the end of the stick. So it basically negates the whole point of feed forward in the first place. I think it's more intended for freestyle kinds of people, but in my experience, I just leave it at 0, especially for racing. Acro Trainer angle limit, again, I don't even have angle mode on. Throttle Boost. Okay, so my understanding with Throttle Boost is that when you're increasing throttle, in order to keep the quad flying at the last input session, it might not get as much throttle out of the quad as it wants. Hey, just a quick break from the action. Paul here. Apparently that camera right there decided to stop recording towards the end of that recording. So I missed like 8 minutes of that. No, actually I think like 6. So I just ignore that there's no longer like little me here sitting in the side. It's not crucial. So just have a listen and enjoy. So like because each motor is like increasing and decreasing and increasing and decreasing to try to keep the quad at the angle that you told it to be at, what happens is that its overall thrust output is lower than it's supposed to be. Okay. With the throttle boost, what I believe it's doing is it's relaxing some of that this motor, then this motor, then this motor, and this motor, and just more uniformly increasing power to all of them. And by doing so, you get more throttle. You get a throttle boost, I find that the throttle is a little bit punchier. It's a little bit more responsive. Again, I gave this setting to J-Rod, and he noticed it and didn't like it. I think, especially for someone like him that runs a throttle curve, which I do not, it took away some of the granularity of his throttle, and I don't think he liked that. Whereas when I go, I want it to just go. VBAT PID compensation, I've never noticed a difference with it on or off, so I figure I'm just going to leave it off for the most part, because then it's not messing with the PIDs that I have set. And smart feed forward, I'm told, is really a feature that's designed for line of sight pilots. This was by a Betaflight dev eTracer. So I was told strongly leave it off. Don't ever do anything with it. Okay. iTerm relax I have on RP that's roll and pitch with using the gyro type, and again that kind of feeds back into this feed forward setting where because I usually fights error, by relaxing a little bit, you're going to let that feed forward push the quad faster and faster to respond to you faster and faster. I leave anti-gravity mode on smooth, and I run 5. I don't know if that's good or bad, or I've never really noticed a difference with anti-gravity that much, nor have I really cared. My throttle movements are a little bit smoother than many, especially for racing, and so I'm never like cranking off the throttle to where the quad kind of does that bobble kind of effect, where that's the whole point of anti-gravity. TPA I leave default, and throttle mid and expo I just don't touch because I want a linear throttle curve. Receiver tab, there's nothing to talk there. You can do RC smoothing, which I don't currently do, so I just leave all of that at defaults. For modes, arm, beeper. I don't use a beeper on my quad, but I do have the D-Shot beeper set up. So when I hit that switch, the motors will start beeping, which has been really nice. So, yeah, other than that, we could take a look at the OSD really quick, see what I see. I keep the current draw visible for, again, this is more of a freestyle quad, so I want to know like how many amps I'm drawing at a cruise. So like if I'm going mid-range or long range, I know that I can run a 7 amp cruise on a 1500 milliamp battery for X minutes before I need to turn around and stuff like that. Then milliamp used, as well as just a quick voltage check, errors, my name, and then I like armed minutes visible, as well as my VTX channel and band. It's just a nice double check to make sure that I'm not like running 200 milliwatts at a race or something like that. Yeah. And then I typically use the Betaflight font, which I guess we'll upload right now. Yeah, so that's, that is basically what all of my Betaflight settings are. Sorry for the technical problems, but I hope that you learned a lot from this video, and I hope that it was really useful. Definitely curious to hear your comments and ideas and thoughts and reactions in the comments below, and stay flying.